Hello, everyone, and welcome to Anti-Racism for Allies. My name is Carrie Sawyer, and today we are so honored to get to speak to you about anti-racism post-election. What now? And I have two incredible guests with me today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But I first want to introduce you to Sarah Cooper. She is the executive director of the League of Amazing Programmers. And then we also have Howard Wright. He is the chairman of the board of Pro Kids and many other things as well. So is Sarah. Howard and Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. Ladies first, Sarah, will you thank you so much for yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here. My name's Sarah Cooper. I am a woman who married a redneck and got dragged to America in 2008 because he couldn't stand the weather in London anymore. So I've been living here now for about 12 years. I've had a long career in teaching technology, and my current position is at the League of Amazing Programmers, where I'm also the chair of the board at the United Women of East Africa, which is an organization, a support network of East African women, refugee and immigrant people based in City Heights. And I've been a CASA with Voices for Children for 8 years, and I teach the relationship building portion of the Advocate University there. So I'm kind of embedded in quite a few non-profits in San Diego.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah. And Howard.
Thank you. Carrie, how am I supposed to follow that? I'm just I'm the luckiest guy ever. And the fact that I grew up in San Diego, lucky, and even luckier to graduate from Stanford, actually. I was able to pursue my childhood dream of playing in the NBA for 3 seasons, and then overseas after that. I worked in high tech at Qualcomm for 14 years and then Intel for 5 years, alongside with Carrie many of those years. Those are my kind of for-profit parts of my resume. The thing that I'm most proud of is probably being chairman of the board of Pro Kids San Diego. My father founded the organization 26 years ago. And when he passed away 13 years ago, he asked me to take over as chairman, and it is by far the greatest gift that he's ever given me.
That's awesome. Thank you both so much for being here. And I'm really excited for the conversation that we are going to get to have. So I'm just going to go over a couple of little things about tonight's flow and kind of set the stage, and then we will dive right into questions. Now, of course, if you have questions, you can feel free to pop those into the Q&A or into the chat, and I will pull them into the discussion that we're having. So tonight we are going to go through the overview and then just. And so as we are setting this stage, I just want to let everyone know that this is what we're creating as a safe, judgment-free space for people to come and ask their questions about anti-racism. And it doesn't matter if you think the question is stupid, or you should have known it already, or maybe even it's a little bit racist. No shame, no blame. We're here to unpack what those questions are. And so as we're here tonight, we can model what it looks like to talk about race. And so I want to leave you with a couple of tips that you can use as you go back into your regular life and talk about race as well. And so the first one of those is that we are all speaking for ourselves only. I'm not speaking for all Black women. Howard's not speaking for all former NBA players. Sarah's not speaking for all Brits. We are speaking about just our experience. And so as you're having conversations with people, drop all the assumptions, all the stereotypes, and we're just connecting one-on-one, getting information real time and reacting based on that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we don't know everything. No one knows everything about everything. I don't know everything about Black history, for example, and I'm actually terrible with history in general. The American MO. I don't know, Howard, do you know everything about playing basketball?
I do
everything? Not. Sarah, do you know everything about amazing programmers? So we don't know everything, and that's okay. Exactly. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to get it wrong, but what we do is commit to going, to keep learning, and to do better next time. And speaking of that, this is a lifelong journey, and we're all at different points in our journey, and there's no wrong place to be. The right place to be is where you are, and then just committing to continue down that road to and through anti-racism. So Howard, Sarah, anything else you would like to add for the audience when we think about just talking about race and tips that they can take back with them?
So sure, I'll go, Carrie, since you've given us the platform, which is I probably watched more Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and cable news the last week. I don't think this is good for our psyche. I don't think this is good for our system. You always try to get a balanced approach and a middle right or a middle left about something. I think part of this is a greater responsibility for us individually to educate ourselves and avoid the disinformation campaign that has been, hurled at us, through the ratings of the networks. I think there's a responsibility to use these Zoom long-form adult conversations with folks that may not have voted for the candidate that you voted for, but to do it in a warm, safe place like you've been able to present for us here. I think that's one of my big outcomes from the last week.
Great, thank you. Sarah, anything to add to this conversation and takeaways for people?
I agree 100% with what Howard's talking about. I think that human connection is the only way we're going to make any progress. And it's what we all crave and what we need. And we're tricking our brains when we think that we're making connections by collecting information in other ways. It's fake news, literally, when we get it from someone else. So if you do have questions or you have concerns or fears, then the best place to start is always to find someone human to talk to.
Yes, I love that. Finding someone human to talk to, making that human connection. Awesome. So before we start, I do want to acknowledge all of our veterans out there and any veterans who are on the call today. Thank you. Thank you so much for your service. All right, you two, what do you think? Are you ready to jump into the questions?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Okay, so this first one, we're just setting the groundwork. I want to hear from both of you. What does it mean to be an anti-racism ally in your minds?
I'm gonna go first. I think that we're aware from different degrees of racism all around us in the environments that we're in, work, home, friends, neighbors. And for most people, I think it's quite an honest, understandable situation to just wish it wasn't there and to pretend it didn't exist. So you can have, Black friends and colleagues and not consider yourself to be a racist person, but still prefer to ignore what you see and what you hear in the environment around you. And I think to become an ally means taking any small step in the right direction of acknowledging and seeking to counteract racism. And that doesn't have to be, massive protesting, or it doesn't have to cost you a lot of time, money, or emotion. It can just be a question of, finding some small things that you can do. And the other aspect of it for me is to be prepared to embrace racism in all its complexity. Because I think that we want to squeeze it down into a small concept that is digestible so that we can put it to one side and say, right, we've done that now. We're not racist anymore. And that is, an impossible solution. You can't make it go away. We are steeped in it. It's the fabric of our society. It's basically how everything operates at the moment. So we're not going to cure it tomorrow. You know, reinstalling normalcy to the democracy isn't going to cure it tomorrow. Because let's face it, we've been racist for a very, very, very long time. We've had a lot of practice and need to accept there are many facets to the problem and we can't solve it all at once.
I would love to piggyback on that, what Sarah just mentioned, which is we have to educate ourselves. We have to be more responsible than the headline of one tweet or the top of somebody's Facebook page that only does, it doesn't do anything except confirm your own bias that you have. I don't need to have a degree in African American studies to know what I know, or to read more books about subjects that I am not a subject matter expert in. Then I think the conversation can be both deeper vertically as well as horizontally of how we have gotten here. Some folks, I've been 6'8" since I've been 17 years old. So I have height privilege. And there are some folks that it's uncomfortable to talk about an ingrained, undeserved, unmerited privilege in this country without it being perceived as you're trying to diminish my accomplishments.
Yeah.
So the responsibility is to get outside of social media, to get outside of cable news, is to the documentaries, the books, the audio books, the things that are in the Smithsonian that we have access to on all of our computers, and actually challenge oneself to be a anti-racism ally. And if I could go on just for a second, Carrie, which is now the call to action is, if you want to pick up a sign and go march, that's your prerogative. If you want to pick up a rock and go throw it at somebody, we ask that you stay home. You're not representing any three of us on this call. You're not doing anything that my ancestors died, bled, and tried to live for that pays homage to them. Now the goal, especially in this year where we had to sit in front of our TVs and the pandemic was here and the election was coming, you have to be not passively anti-racist, you have to be openly, aggressively anti-racism, openly and aggressively anti-sexism, anti-misogyny, openly and aggressively, let's see if I can pull this off without insulting anybody, anti-Semitic. The goal now is not to be a lukewarm individual. With the gifts that we've been given and the platforms that we have a chance to influence. And with that chance to influence comes a deep responsibility to know what the hell you're talking about, and not just some parroted quote from, again, whoever you watched on TV, on cable news network that night.
Yes, absolutely. I love what both of you said, and just pulling out the parts about the active, right? Anti-racism is active. There's no neutral also in anti-racism. Either you are interrupting racism or you are allowing it to continue around you. And like Sarah said, it's very complicated, it's very deep, it is in everything, and no one is asking you to fix all of it right now. But what we are asking is for people to start to engage little by little, more and more, right at the point where they are. You see, we're all in this own unique sphere of influence, and whether that is in your family, in a nonprofit, in your community, at your work, you can learn what racism looks like, and then you can start to interrupt it, and in that start to become anti-racist in the moment, and again, stepping into that more and more and more, if that makes sense.
100%. I think it's very easy for us to otherize the things that we don't want to be associated with and push them onto the shoulders of others. And we have caricatures that we can point to and say, look how racist that person is. It's much harder to say, okay, am I making the right choices here? Have I got biases, threaded through what I'm doing? Am I making assumptions? And as Howard says, start with your personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think it is, I love that, Sarah, the othering, the thing that makes us uncomfortable. But what we all have to do is say like these hard words, like I am racist. It's not, I'm not racist or I'm not a racist, but I am. Because racism is throughout our entire world and it manifests differently depending upon what you are as far as your race and ethnicity. But we were socialized to be racist. Black people are racist against ourselves, against other races, and you can say that for every single other race, right? So starting from that truth that I have been socialized in a racist country, now what am I going to do about that, right? That was like provocative, I know, but I would love to work with people who are not afraid to say that because it's true, and now we can acknowledge where we are and move somewhere else.
Yeah. If you're uncomfortable, it's good to be noticing that you're uncomfortable and to try to figure out why.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, if you grew up and were socialized to be racist, saying I am racist isn't any like big confession. It's like, well, of course I am. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to repair it, make amends? And it's how can we get to that healing place? That's the work that we have to do that is going to take so long. I was grateful that we were, as you say, we were forced to be focused in the aftermath of the George Floyd incident, when everybody suddenly was talking about racism and protests were happening, and it was impossible for anybody to avoid the conversation. But my concern is that we don't lose momentum and think, okay, well, that was 2020. My concern is, what are we going to do for 21? What are our goals for 2025? And how do we, build the future that everybody can live in safely?
So Sarah, I'm a prisoner of hope. And so I hope that we are through the looking glass in terms of becoming self-aware, self-responsibility, the way different groups have galvanized the vote, the things that have happened in states that have gone blue, some states have gone red. I think folks of color have understood from a distance that there was power in voting. But now that the votes swing elections every 4 years, of course, those are the big ones. And, who's the president has some bearing, but who's governor, who's congressman, who are the DAs, who are the elected officials and the sheriffs. And that also has significant impact on you regionally. And so down ballot, I think Stacey Abrams and others have done magnificent jobs not being on the sidelines. Oh, I got cheated, or I didn't win, or I got gerrymandered out of some votes. But saying, okay, her responsibility is to pay it forward for John Lewis and all the others that died on bridges that we know about or were hung from trees that we don't know about. I would like to think that this is a movement and not a moment, and that becomes closer to an AI engine becoming self-aware and operating inside all of the legal boundaries needed, but to get folks out and vote. It was burned into us since I can remember, and had no time other than this year that I recognized that the power of the vote means so much to so many folks in so many rural and urban areas throughout this country. It's our responsibility. We can't go back to the voting habits that we had, in the primaries, or Black folks. We just can't vote when Obama's on the ticket.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So let's just go right into the main theme of this this particular anti-racism for allies. And this is a two-part question that I would love to hear both of your thoughts on. So how does the outcome of the election impact the work of anti-racism, both for like individuals, but then also at the system level? Who wants to take that first?
Okay. Sarah saw me smiling, and so this is a perfect example, Carrie. There are individuals at some of the highest levels of this country that do not believe systematic racism or racism exist in our judicial system or criminal justice system or up and down the vertical. While I get frustrated with those individuals, instead of barking at them via social media, I've decided to try to go on a charm offensive with each and every person that I come in contact with. I have a chance to have a positive contagion of after Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, I was deluged, probably like both of you guys were, with my white counterpart friends saying, "Oh, I didn't know," or "I'm so sorry, what can I do?"
Yeah.
And Carrie, you and I talked about this. I put on my LinkedIn, okay, if you want to have a legitimate long form conversation about this, here are 6 books to read. Here are 4 or 5 different documentaries that you can watch right off Netflix. That's the required reading. Please don't come to me without having done the required reading, because there is no systematic racism, or I don't see race. I really put those folks in the category of the flat earthers or the Holocaust deniers. I cannot be enlightened by, nor could I share some enlightenment with someone who has not spent 52 years in my body, or been the child of all of the thousands of ancestors that came before me, to say, oh no, everybody can pull themselves up by their bootstraps. So it's the balance that I'm trying to seek, which is to be an informant, to be an operative of some progress, but there's also a line where I'm not going to engage with folks that have no desire to fundamentally understand what we go through every day.
What do we do with all those other ones then?
So that's what I haven't figured out.
So the problem that I'm having this week in particular, while we watch, the last dying throes of the administration, cringingly, embarrassingly, I'm really perturbed by the fact that more people this time voted for Donald Trump than voted for him last time, not fewer. And, I know the common joke is, I have a black friend. Well, I have, white friends who are on the fringes, people who believe that all lives matter, people who believe that blue lives matter. Is the problem for me is to find a way to engage with those people. The people who will do the required reading, great, come along and be in my party anytime. But for those other people, that's what I'm struggling with at this point post-election is what are we going to do with the almost half of the country that is terrified of change, that is terrified of, the future.
Yeah, Sarah,
all important.
Yeah, Sarah, sorry to interrupt, but there's an author that talked about retrenchment in this post-racial, post-Obama world that we all thought we were living in. Is I think many folks thought, okay, racism is over because this one individual black man got to the highest office and he did a pretty good job for the 8 years that he was there. What we saw in 2016 and this past week was this retrenchment. Change is difficult for folks. Equality is a mythical word that really, I don't think, belongs in a traditional English dictionary the way that, American English should be defined. We've never addressed kind of this truth and reconciliation of the original sin of this country, and all of the sins up to and including now. And so that's a lot for someone who is on the fringe himself in a rural area, that feeling like, okay, my voice isn't being heard. 70-something million folks voted for Donald Trump. Yeah. They're going to be in these PTA meetings with us. That we're going to see them in Starbucks every day. We're going to see them in our corporate deal making that we do. I don't have a solution, but I know what I can't do is just recoil deeper into my own bias. I'm going to try to be a bit more of an influencer, one at a time, not blasting, to some platform that I don't have or something that nobody would listen to anyway. But I think about the responsibility of the generation that came before us. My parents and John Lewis and some of these elected officials that are the icons of all icons, they had it rough. What are we doing with our opportunity to be the modern day version, or at least take the baton and make some forward progress with that? And that I haven't figured out. And anybody that has some ideas, I'm all ears as to how we make some forward progress together, not just blue states or red states.
I think that's where the ally piece can come in, though, is where I'm unable to influence my friend, but I know that his wife is sympathetic and she wants to be an ally, and I can help influence her thinking and influence, giving her tools or giving her perspectives that she will then pass on. So I feel like it is a rippling effect. But initially, I think the metaphor you're using of truth and reconciliation is kind of a difficult one this week, but I think it's going to get easier. This week we're angry. But how dare you? How dare you? Next week we're going to have to, breathe a bit and just keep doing the work, keep digging, and keep trying to, embrace people and hear their concerns, hear their fears. There does have to be a line, though, where you just say, this is wrong. This is against the law. There's going to be a lot of work to do to repair the damage that's been done for the last 4 years, with people being given permission to let their worst selves out, and to just imbibe the most rancid lies. And it's been very, very damaging 4 years, I think, for the entire country, not least for those people who think that, they were being represented by Donald Trump and the right. It's been very damaging for them. It's bad for a human to be evil.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I have a mentor who I've been talking to some of this about, and she talks about how Native American children were used as target practice, right? Back when the Pilgrims came, and that hurt those people who did that. In addition, of course, to all the trauma that was caused to the families and the children, but it hurt them to enact these great acts of evil and enact anything that hurts other people. You take that into yourself as well, and so. That's, I think, why everyone here has been talking about this idea of healing and the necessity for that part of it. And I think this is such a difficult question to answer. What do you do with the people those 70 million? And I like to think about it like a bell curve sometimes, because some of those people voted for Trump out of ignorance, out of ease. Like, they didn't actually really think about it. Like, it wasn't a impassioned vote. It was just a vote. And so that means those people who are there are like fair game for us. And by us, I mean anyone who wants to create a world where everyone can be safe, thrive, and pursue the life that will make them happy, right? This isn't like Democrats versus Republican or anyone else versus anyone. This is really just goodness of people and letting that come out versus those darker sides. And so how do we find that common ground? Because when I go to my Republican friend's house, he wants the same thing for his family that I want for my family, right? How do we connect there? I think there's so much blind, like just loyalty in the voting and in the political party. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole for sure, but 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 I think that there's also a point where there are people where it's okay to be like, I have to cut this. Like, we're not getting anywhere, and this isn't a good use of my time or energy. I actually feel like it's almost like that with almost everyone. If you're trying to convince someone, like instead of spending the time convincing them, go and work with the people who are raising their hand, who have opened based on everything that's happening and that is happening. Go and find those people and do work. While these people are squawking over here, likely not doing very much besides talking, we can be over here getting work done. And eventually, this is how I always thought of diversity and inclusion at companies. Eventually, the people who are against it will get drug along and they will get caught up in the positive momentum that we're creating as we are building a place where we all want to live, where we all want our families to live in the lives that we want to have.
Let's also shine a light right here on you, Carrie. This type of effort, this type of use of your platform is an enormous stride forward to have some number 3, 4, 5 of not the talking heads on TV that are just there to try to get a soundbite that they can retweet or put on Instagram. It is a conversation of, okay, let's do this. Let's throw the ridiculous radical right, keep them over there. The lunatic left, let's keep them over there. The centrist, middle left, middle right folks that we all represent from that group is going to lead this country forward. I just don't think we're going to have any more polarized, candidates. Or at least I hope not in my lifetime. The tribalism is terrible. The confirmation bias is ridiculous, and folks vote along party lines without even knowing anything about the candidate. Whenever somebody calls me to raise money for some candidate, I always say, character is destiny. Tell me who your candidate is, what he or she has done, where she stands on the issue. I don't need to know if they are red or blue. I need to know if their policies match something that looks like progress, forward momentum in this country versus the retrenchment of, if we all retreat to our preconceived ideas and biases, we would have a civil war in this country that I'm fearful, or at least a Cold War, maybe not a civil war. There'll be Kenosha and other horrific things like that happen. But even having a Cold War inside of this country keeps us from being as great as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And this is, with all of its faults, still the greatest nation in the world. We just have to, as Baldwin said, criticize her from time to time to keep her on that path to her moral high arc.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to remind everyone, if you have questions or any comments, feel free to throw those in the chat or in the Q&A. I want to take a question from that we had some people submit earlier. So this one is really specific, and it has to do with defunding the police. So some say the defund the police movement is a big part of what pushed Black voters to the polls, delivering Biden the win. But others say it's what cost Jamie Harrison his South Carolina Senate seat. Who's right, and what does that mean for how we should be talking about defunding the police going forward? What are your thoughts? So when you even hear defund the police, like, what is that? Like, it's such a polarizing topic, but what do you two think about it?
What I immediately thought when it came to the fore, and I live in a house with a 15-year-old, who is in that blossom of activism and how exciting it all is, you know, and they're not allowed out at the moment. So all they've got is TikTok. And so they're, you know, riling each other up, frothing at the mouth. But when I heard that defund the police phrase initially, I thought, what a shame that we have to condense something to such an inadequate soundbite. It's going to do so much, not going to do the work that we want it to do. It's going to just provide ammunition. So it's not that I disagree with the underpinning ideas about reducing the militarization of this police force in the country. You know, I've been here for 12 years, but I'm still in shock about how things are organized here. You know, we do it differently back home. The police don't carry guns. They are racist, of course they are. We're all growing up in a racist world, but they don't, you know, routinely kill people for being Black. And also the amount of tanks, and, you know, you see them on the streets, it's like looking at an army. And I want to defund that. I don't want to be paying for that, but neither do I want to minimize the significance of having a civil society where we're governed by laws, and there are people who are willing to put themselves in a situation where they will hold us accountable and, you know, take action if needed. So there's a lot of stuff that we're asking the police to do that's unreasonable, that they're not equipped to do, such as deal with mental health issues and social issues on a wider, you know, frame. But in my heart, yeah, I want to defund the police. As a political argument, I think it's flawed.
I could not agree more.
Yeah, I feel like the question was framed very, very well. Like, you know, did it have a positive effect or a negative effect in terms of the election? I feel like it probably had both. And I think that's something we find difficult in this country to acknowledge, is ambivalence and mutual effects that have, you know, in some cases, in some areas, and for some people, it will have pushed them out to vote. And for some, it will have had a chilling effect. Sorry, I tend to rant.
No, I could not agree more, Sarah, which is, it's too polarizing. The phraseology is not correct. There are some methods so we can all continue to improve on a, you know, municipal and a state and federal level. If you want more accountability for the police as part of the annual budget of a forensic examination, you know, accountancy examination of all the dollars, and should go to more schools or roads, or should, okay, that's a legitimate conversation to have by regulators and, you know, elected officials. The defund the police is immediately going to trigger part of the retrenchment that we talked about before, which is, and then they don't want, you know, police interaction in their society. They said, no, we want the cops to live and treat all of us with the same amount of dignity and respect. So I have family members that have worked in police forces all over the country, including one that has worked at the LAPD for 30 years. I never felt called to do that, but I am in awe of folks that are willing to risk their life and their livelihood to protect and serve. Now, for those who do not protect or serve, I think we need to deconstruct some of this qualified immunity and build up a national database. We need to have a no chokehold in this country. This is the continental United States. This is 2020. There's no need for a choke. It is better training. So in some cases, given the community, given the state, it actually might have more money going to police departments for better police officers. I would give that. I would give, X amount of dollars more or percentage in my taxes for that. But what we have right now is fractured, and how I'm treated, when I lived in San Diego, Carrie, how I'm treated in Rancho Santa Fe where I lived versus how I'm treated when I leave Pro Kids in City Heights are two different interactions altogether.
Yeah.
And you and Shelley Zimmerman talked about this on one of your webinars. These are even more difficult conversations to have, and I think there needs to be a closeness to it, and we need to defund the police out of our vernacular. Think about what Martin Luther King and others did. It's Civil Rights Act. Who's going to be against people having civil rights or equality and housing and the busing? It was, let's take some of the toxicity out of the word or the phrase.
Yeah, we had a question come in the Q&A that's right along this lines. Do you think there would have been less of a polarizing reaction if the message was decriminalize the police, or would the perception be that the left was still anti-police? And I still think that decriminalize the police still makes it seem like the police are all criminals. So it's still a phrase that puts people on the defensive. I mean, I think to Howard's point, this idea of how do you pick a set of words that no one can say, no, well, I don't want civil rights for everyone. I don't want, these good things. I think that defund the police was picked on purpose. I feel like it was planted to create the dissonance and the discord that it did. Honestly, when I first heard that, I was like, yeah, that's on purpose.
Yeah, in that moment, you take advantage of people's anger and their fear, and you use that, and you don't let that go to waste, and you come up with things that will inflame the situation. But for me, when I look at it, has to be looked at in a holistic fashion, and the police are one important part of the whole body of our society. There is racism in the police, and unfortunately, they have more power and weaponry to inflict more damage than your average citizen. But I would say they're no more racist than many other factions in society. They're just, it's given, it's more dangerous, because it ends up with people dying. And that we can't let that continue. That's got to stop. And whatever way we can, we need to stop it. But what it is to me is a reflection of racism that runs through every thread of the society, from the government at the top down to the street sweepers at the bottom. And until we address that single problem as it pertains to everything, we're going to have racists in the police, and we're going to have racist attitudes, and just also racist reactions, even from people who are not necessarily consciously feeling anti-Black, they're going to react in racist ways, and they're going to be racist outcomes.
So Howard and Sarah, what do you say now that we're in this transition between the old and the new? What do you say to the people who are in the trenches doing this anti-racism work now that things are turning over in the administration? What message do you give to them?
My message to them would be to hold the Biden administration accountable for the promises that have been made. He's not responsible for every promise that every Democratic candidate has ever made to the Black community. But this year in particular, there is the window dressing of, yes, progress will be progress, but there's also some tactical, legislative, executive order things that in order for the country to make progress and heal a little bit, that he will need to do. There'll be no equivocation. There'll be no, well, they won't let me do it. He has to, leaders lead, Carrie, and he has to lead. And he would not be getting behind the Resolute desk if it was not for female vote, if it wasn't for the African-American vote, the Latino vote. And he needs to be held accountable by his constituents.
Yep.
How do we hold him accountable? How do we hold the administration accountable?
Well, I think that, well, I'm fairly new to this. I voted for the first time this year. I became a citizen earlier this year, and I was really horrified by how complicated it was. I took heart from a lot of, there's a lot of work going on in your local area, and there are people doing that work. So reaching out to someone who has more experience and finding out who are the people that you need to write to, who are the people that you need to call, who do we need to get into office locally at a state level, and how do we hold them accountable? Because it kind of goes up the chain, doesn't it? Obviously, I'm not going to be able to have any particular influence on Kamala or Joe, but I can influence my own senators, my own congresspeople, and my own local politicians. And learning how to do that is something that, again, we have to be doing in a human circle, making connections with the people who've got the experience and teaching it to our younger generations. I feel like this generation that's coming up, they are mad, and they're not going to be, they're not going to be quiet for the next 4 years. So they give me hope.
They give me lots of hope. And so my oldest daughter, Alyssa, is 26. She graduated Stanford undergraduate with honors and distinction. She graduated from Stanford Law School 3 years later with honor and distinction. She's in fact the child and the student that my mother wished that I was. But she actually absolutely sits at the center of a demographic of more learned, more driven, more progressive, more willing to listen, more not afraid to walk in a room like 3,000 ancestors are walking in there with her. I seriously, all teasing aside, Carrie and Sarah, I think the generation that's coming behind us is going to be mentioned with the greatest generation that we talked about, our grandparents in World War II, because they are armed, they're more diverse, they're more colorful, they are unapologetically brilliant in what they have done. And this has cracked this, the year 2020 has cracked the seal on all these conversations that were left for decades. Nope, you leave that in the locker room. Nope, you leave that, you don't talk about that at Thanksgiving dinner. It is all immediately in front of us. And the spokesperson and the volunteer army to, I don't know, maybe guide us out of our own malaise or complacency that we've had is the generation coming with, my oldest daughter, Alyssa Wright.
100%. They're amazing. And they put us to shame if we don't do the work. But I think you're right. It's about them having they haven't been well trained to keep quiet, to be seen and not heard. They have information. They don't actually know what privacy is. So that's not a concern for them. Don't be embarrassing in front of the neighbors. They have much less to lose because they've got everything to lose. They see us as the generation that's torched their planet and left them with no future. They don't have, anything to look forward to but what they make for themselves. So, and then so intolerant of some of this hypocrisy that we've been prepared to put up with for in excess of 50 years each, where we've been yes sir, no sir, in order to stay safe. They just won't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sarah and Howard, what do you say to the people who are standing on the sideline right now, but have a desire to get into this work in whatever way it looks like for them, stepping into that? What do you say to our sideliners? How do we get them into
this? This is very, very personal. And as I said, everybody need not be on the front line, holding a sign, arguing with the other side. There are letters to the editor, there is donations, there are calling your congressman or your congresswoman, there are trips to DC, there's a way to localize and galvanize support and energy for what you believe in. Lots of different ways. So I don't profess to prescribe to somebody else what they should do with their time, money, or resources. I will say this, your grandchildren will ask you in the summer of 2020, what did you do?
Yeah.
And I feel my ancestors who have long since passed, watching, making sure I'm trying to do the right thing. And then I have there's an inevitability of what did you do with your time, your money, your voice, your platform to make it incrementally better, 1% better, 3% better, 17% better, pick a number. And those that sat on the sidelines during the 60s in the civil rights movement, shame on them. Those that sat on the sidelines during the protesting of the Vietnam War, shame on them. There's seminal moments in American history that define generations, and this year is defining ours.
Yep.
And shame on you if you're sitting back, cracking open another beer, watching Fox or CNN, and just complaining on the internet.
Yeah. It's an inexorable change. There's nothing going to hold it back. It is going to happen. And, we have in tech the notion of early adopters. We've seen the early adopters come out, and now who's coming behind them? If you're on the sidelines now, that's fine, as long as you start planning what your first step is going to be. And it has to, can be the first step. You don't have to map out your whole future. You can just pick one thing. And even if it's just reading a book, that is going to have an impact on what you then choose to do. So I feel like the sidelines, sometimes it's like standing on the edge of the pool, not wanting to jump in because it's scary or it's cold. So you just have to choose a way to put that first toe in, and you will regret it if you don't find some way to feel that you are helping to do the disrupting of racism that you were mentioning at the top of the hour, Carrie. You're either in it or you're actually contributing to allowing it to happen. You're either making an improvement or allowing the rot to continue.
Mm-hmm. And there is no wrong place to start, and there is no too late either. Right now is that time, and we all have unique talents and skills, so use those things. No one's asking you to go read a book that bores the pants off you. There are so many different kinds of ways that you can engage in educating yourself. Find the area that speaks to you and what you're passionate about. And that is a big part of the work. If you're in healthcare, chances are, you care about healthcare. There's a ton of systemic racism in healthcare, like dive into any of that, right? Wherever you are is where you start. And so I think that message. And again, I also like that you will regret not having put your toe in and letting that momentum carry you the rest of the way, because this is a pivotal moment. We're making history right now. This is the resurgence of the civil rights movement. That's where we are right now. And I want to take one more question. We got one in the chat, and then do just a wrap up in these next couple minutes that we have. So, and I think that this question actually dovetails really nicely into what we're talking about right now. So the question is, how do I talk to my friends and relatives about looting and rioting? Some take it as an immediate dismissal of the message. How can I verbalize the painful complexity of where looting and rioting may be coming from? And I think this speaks to the larger question of like, what if I don't agree with like what Black Lives Matter stands for? Does that mean like I'm out? Like I don't need to do anything in this space? And I would love to hear what both of you think when you hear about people like, oh, they looted, they rioted. I just can't get involved with that.
This person probably knows me because I've been pretty vocal about that. And so the few bad apples in a police department and the few bad apples in a peaceful, nonviolent protest, they are built out of the same genetic code, and they are prey to our lowest instincts. And you put them in a pressure cooker in the dark, things are going to happen. The fallacy, which really disturbs me, Carrie, is the kid in Wisconsin drives across state lines. He gets an AR-15 from an adult somewhere. They don't know if his mother took him or somebody else took him. He is going there to another state to protect what? To protect a yogurt shop or a gasoline shop. And the false equivalence of this property matters as much as my life or any one of my children's life. That's where I feel my blood pressure going up right now, as a matter of fact. And so the calm conversation is to put some boundaries around the actual conversation that you want to have. Let's talk about, person A in city B in, this construct. Let's not jump in and out of libertarian and Antifa and Proud Boys. Let's stay and just thoroughly examine what is containable for an adult conversation. But I find myself spilling to and from conversations that have nothing to do with the origin story. You will lose some friends this way. And my sphere of influence has gotten better based on some of the so-called friends that I've lost. So don't be afraid to lose some friends or folks that say that they are friends, would be my advice to the person that asked that question.
Yeah, even if they're members of your family.
Yeah.
There's redemption later, but you do have to decide what you believe, what you think is going on. And I mean, I lived just behind Brixton Road when the Brixton riots were happening. I don't know if it's very particularly famous in the States, but it's very famous in the UK in 1983. And my house was therefore a refuge for people who were, running once things got out of hand, because when you don't have order, you have disorder, you have chaos. And wherever there is chaos, certain people are going to take the opportunity to, do whatever they can. And it's not, I don't even think it's economic for most of the cases. It's usually just driven by this hyped up adrenaline and opportunity. So people will turn over cars and set them on fire because there isn't any order. And I fear that the people aren't willing to look deeply. They want a simple black and white answer to things. If you have an entire society populated, 99.9% of the people who have very little and an opportunity presents itself, some proportion of that group is going to take that opportunity to go and steal something. Others are just going to go out and break things because they like the noise and the kind of chaos of it. They enjoy it. Why do people take drugs? I don't know. But some people do. There are unexplainable elements of it for me that, as Howard is saying, do not make an equivalent argument to, you can't say we dare not protest about people getting killed in case somebody breaks a Target window or burns down the bank, which happened up the road from me in La Mesa. And, the residents were very saddened by the change, but this is going to require some changes. So I think we can live without that bank, but we have to change society.
Yeah, I think you both made some really good points, and this idea that protesting is different than looting and rioting. And also you have to think about where you're getting your sources from. I feel like after George Floyd, the whole world was protesting, right? And the majority of, not even like 60 to 50%, like 80, 90% of the protesting was peaceful. Now, depending on your source, you're going to hear some different information, right? But that's where you have to actually dig into what you're consuming and what you're spreading. And so understanding why people protest, talking about that, doing some reading about that, but then also knowing that that's not like all that's happening, right? And I think this speaks to Howard's earlier point. What is like this fundamental message that we're actually talking about? Black Lives Matter is about not killing Black people. And if you are okay with that, like the killing of Black people, then you're against Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. If you're not okay with it, then you support Black Lives Matter. And not even just the organization, because this is so much bigger than the organization. I almost like, I think that Black Lives Matter has been a catalyst for this resurgence of the civil rights movement. When I think about the work we're doing here, this isn't about Black Lives Matter. It's about civil rights, right? I mean, it's bigger, it's grown bigger than that. And so that's the conversation that you need to bring your friends and family into. Forget about whether you agree with the individual people who lead that organization. It's not about that. It's about lives. It's about killing people, and it's about justice for everyone, right? So.
And that isn't to be conflated with a terrifying concept of socialism, which apparently over here is a bad thing. It's, you know, you shouldn't be conflating issues that have no comparison. But also the other thing is that we've been so well trained to only hear the inflammatory things and the attention-seeking news, you know, and not the boring run-of-the-mill, middle of the road. What is the actual thing we're trying to do here? Everyone's all about the latest bang.
I have a quick story. Yeah, Condi Rice was my sophomore year political science teacher and professor. And so I am convinced to this day that if you took away everybody's search engine and you sat down all the politicians and had them quizzed on Marxism, socialism, you know, anarchism, any ism, none of them would be able to actually completely identify it in the oligarchs versus the, you know. So it is these buzzwords that are meant to continue to divide us. And I think we have to be intentional about what we put in our mind. I just want to come all the way back, Carrie, to kind of the work that is being done in City Heights with Sarah and others, which is lived in San Diego my whole life. And when I was little, my father was playing for the Chargers. The last year of his contract, he became the 4th highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL. And we moved from basically City Heights to north of 8, you know, San Carlos and Del Cerro. Yeah. And so I grew up a child of privilege. And so that comes with it, the responsibility. What am I supposed to do with that? Because if my father not been 6'4", 280 pounds, quick feet, and a mean disposition, I would still be living in City Heights. And so what we've done with Pro Kids for the last 26 years is give the kids a safe place for mentoring, tutoring, after school programs. And then when they qualify, we give them scholarships to go on to college. So these are the kids that Washington and all the other corners of the country, people talk about, well, those are failure academies or those are kids of color. As Sarah will tell you, there are dozens of languages spoken in and around City Heights. It is the most diverse population in the state of California. Those kids coming out of Hoover and Crawford and Horace Mann, those are our collective kids that are going to Ivy Leagues and Stanfords and Notre Dames and on to business schools and on to graduate schools and medical schools. So the mythology that we have to convince ourselves or get out of this mythology is that these kids can't STEM or they can't do, or they have a altitude that they're going to hit, or apex that they're going to hit that's going to be lower than my daughter or other kids of privilege. That is the BS that is that terrifies me, that in this year of our Lord 2020, we still have this insidiousness of racism or sexism saying, oh, well, that child is probably only going to be able to do trade school or whatever. No, we've shown it for over 26 years, tens of thousands of kids through the program, and hundreds of kids to the most prestigious universities in the world from our neighborhood.
Yeah. And they're our future leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much, Sarah and Howard. Thank you everyone for staying over. I want to give you both an opportunity to just like give some closing for everyone when we think about anti-racism post-election, like what now? And then I will wrap it up for us.
My what now is, okay, take a deep breath, take a couple of days off, get a massage or whatever you're allowed to do in the lockdown, and regroup. Don't forget to take care of yourself. Put your own oxygen mask on so that you can continue with the next 4 years, which is going to be, the work is still going to be around us, continuing.
I echo that. And exhale. Now let's get back to work, which is become more intelligent than we are, individually and collectively. I posted something on LinkedIn about some of the books that I've been trying to read and try to recommend. And there's Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, even go watch Ava's 13th Amendment. There are some world-class authors, and Eddie Glaude and Michael Eric Dyson and others. See if you can just give yourself a 2-day, a 3-day, maybe even a week reprieve, where you turn off social media and actually try to, reemerge as a more well-rounded human and have some thoughts, and then engage in a deep conversation with someone in the LGBT community. I've been an advocate and an ally. I am flaming heterosexual, but I've been an ally for women and that LGBT community simply because it's the right thing to do. And Carrie, you and I have heard things in elevators in corporate America where they didn't know that we were allies for something, and we were the first one to say that is not only it's politically incorrect, you should not say that, and I feel uncomfortable with you saying that. Now, luckily I've been this size, or 6'8", since I was about 16, 17 years old, so nobody really calls me a name to my face. But with that size and with that responsibility, it becomes to fight for those who are not my size. And again, pulling back to the kids at Pro Kids, is to be a voice, hopefully be a bit of a mentor for them to get out of the current situation to a much higher ground and opportunity for themselves and their families.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you both so much. There was a question in the chat about your recommended reading list, Howard. So I will get that from you and send that out to everyone so that you will have that as well. Sarah, Howard, where can people find you if they want to connect or know more about you and your journey, the work you're doing?
So on LinkedIn, or my work email is sarah with an H .cooper@jointheleague.org. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah. And probably the best place for me is LinkedIn. And it's easy to find me, Howard Wright, Intel or Qualcomm or Stanford, pretty easy to find. The rest of my platforms are semi-private because sometimes I say stuff and I have to delete it later. But I'm convinced that the forum of social media is the least productive venue or kind of medium for arguments or cognitive thought. It is for zingers, and it's for great insults, and it's for funny quips and ridiculous memes. And the vindictive side of me and the petty side of me is there for all of that. The long form thought that I have, that I try to express, is on LinkedIn.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I will provide all that in the follow-up email. And again, Sarah, Howard, you are both amazing. Thank you for this incredible conversation. Thank you everyone for sticking with us to the end. Thank you for coming. And next week, we have our last Anti-Racism for Allies session in 2020. It is going to be titled Power, Privilege, and Design. We're talking with the world-renowned Don Norman and his journey to and through anti-racism and what that means in the context of designing systems that influence the world. So I'm super excited. It's going to be an incredible talk. We hope that you'll join us Wednesday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll send out the links so you can all register. And again, thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.